Hi everyone, welcome to Writers of the World. Our topic today is Writing Your Passion. Before we get started, remember to subscribe, then click the bell to be notified when new videos are uploaded. To learn more about speaking on a panel, click the link in the description below the video. And to all our viewers, there is a storm going on for two of our panelists, so if you hear thunder, that is what is happening. We have a fascinating panel with us today whose books cover a wide variety of genres, from fiction to historical, memoir, and nonfiction. Stephanie Raffelock is a storyteller who offers a fresh philosophy about growing older, helping to dispel some of these toxic stereotypes of aging. She's the podcast host of Coffee Table Wisdom and the author of A Delightful Little Book on Aging, a 2020 spring release from She Writes Press. Stevie Z. Fischer writes about the dynamics of people, nature, and power in small-town New England. In River Rules, her debut environmental suspense novel, she explores how the refusal to be marginalized and second chance opportunities create everyday heroes. Stevie teaches college writing, loves dogs, and lives in Connecticut. Deborah Burns is a media executive turned author of Saturday's Child, a memoir about growing up with her unconventional mother. Kirkus Reviews hails Saturday's Child as devilishly sharp, and it has been featured by Entertainment Weekly, Parade, Refinery 29, Forbes, Pop Sugar, and more, with The Hollywood Reporter recommending that it be a movie or series. Kari Bovee is the award-winning author of the Annie Oakley Mystery Series and the Grace Michelle Mystery Series. When she isn't writing, she's enjoying her family, her 4 dogs and 4 horses, and she and her husband live in an ancient village in the beautiful Land of Enchantment, New Mexico, in an old-style hacienda along the Rio Grande. Welcome, everyone.
Hi.
So let's just jump into it. How did you find your passion, and why did you feel that you had to tell this story?
So I've been on a creative journey for the last 5 or 6 years. My mother is at the heart of the story. She was an unconventional woman, ahead of her time and larger than life. And she might have been a tad narcissistic as well. And I was the only child who danced around her. And suddenly I got struck with an idea that's too long a story to tell here, but in a flash of a moment, a thunder strike, so to speak, I became compelled with the notion to write about her more than 20 years after her death. And once that notion hit, it was all consuming, and it took many different twists and turns, and then became the memoir that was published.
I love to hear what lights different people up to write the way that they do, to commit to words their own story. The passion for my story was something that I sort of tripped over. I had been writing for a website called 60 and Me, which is just the way it sounds for women 60 and over. And I realized that without really meaning to, I had fallen into what is now known as the positive aging movement. And my in writing this is that I believe that we can grow old gracefully by staying engaged, by keeping our love alive, that keeps us vital, and by being mentors and elders and also students of the people around us.
I will say that, just to tag on to your ending, that Saturday's Child was my midlife debut. And I was past 50 when the idea struck, and I was 63 when the book actually published. And I never would have had the perspective for it years ago. So it's a wonderful time of life, and I am with you on the pro-aging movement.
Good.
My book is a little bit more about entertainment, and I was very interested in show business growing up, not in the sense that I wanted to be in show business, but I loved all of the old Broadway productions, the old movies. And so I was very interested in writing a story about that. And it just so happened that I had a horse trainer who told me, I don't know if this is true or not, but she told me that her mother was in the Ziegfeld Follies. And I was so intrigued by this. And so I said, well, what was her name? You know, we talked about it for a good 30 minutes. And I went home and I started researching the Ziegfeld Follies. And I was so, I was entertained by what I was reading and what I was learning. And I thought, I've got to write a story around this. And I wanted to write murder mystery. I wanted to write something fun and entertaining with, you know, that showed the bright lights, the, you know, the stars and the seedy side of show business as well. And so that's kind of how I started with this. And then it sort of morphed into, I originally titled the book Saving Grace. And there's a lot of movies, books called Saving Grace. So the premise behind that was, this was a young girl in show business. She's a costume designer, and she was looking to everyone to sort of save her, help her, mold her. And as the story developed, it became very clear that she was going to have to save herself. And so that's really where I got fired up by the story was, wow, this was a young woman who did not think she was empowered in any way, but she truly was. And she ends up not only saving herself, but saving a number of other people in a lot of different ways, metaphorically, physically. And so that's where it came. And then I changed the title because there were so many. And so now it's titled Grace in the Wings.
Beautiful. So I too am from New York City, like Deborah. And my story is suspense, small town environmental suspense. So how does a girl from New York City write about a small town? Well, it required a move for me, and it was a really hard one. I moved for my husband's job, and I think many women understand just what a sacrifice we can make. I was a Wall Street banker, and it was tough, but we did it for him. So what spurred me is the people I met in this small town and the profession I took up after that, which is college writing. So my students literally and figuratively spoke to me after the Great Recession. They were out of jobs. There were no options. This area died. The aerospace manufacturers, the mom and pops, everything died. And the colleges were overflowing with desperate people. Add to that, nature. I had a crazy dog who required so many walks, and the place she calmed down at was the Connecticut River. So I met everybody who hung out there, bird watchers, eagle seekers, dog rescuers, and just everyday people who shared their love and fear for what was happening with nature along the Connecticut River. So both of those sort of coalesced into this idea that we have problems, not just economic, but environmental. So the idea that there's environmental injustice, social injustice, and economic injustice really drove my story.
And do you feel that your book was a second chance for you to revitalize and transform your journey through life? And when you felt it was time to write it, was that an internal decision or a result of external influences?
I think it was both for me, internal decisions and outer influences. I had been trying my hand at fiction and grown frustrated with, the whole pitching to an agent kind of thing. And this book just seemed to flow so naturally. It was a second chance for a manuscript, but it was also a second chance for me to realize that I'd spent most of my adult years embracing feminism. And how is it that I could embrace feminism and yet as an older woman of 66 and 67 years old be having difficulty finding my own voice? I talked so much about young women finding their voice. And so here I was at 67 feeling maybe I'm not as significant, maybe I'm not as relevant, life is receding from me, and all the kind of myths that we tell ourselves. So there was a second chance for me to say, no, this is a vital passage. This is a noble passage. Aging is a crowning glory. I'd love to re-own that word crone as the crowning glory of this phase of a woman's life. So that's what felt like a second chance to me.
Oh, redefining the word crone. I love that. I think mine was more of a second chance to look at writing as a career. I had started out when I was in my 30s, very serious. I had an agent, and my kids were very young, and it was really difficult to try to manage, this full-time writing gig and small children when my husband was traveling a lot. And so I actually had to put my writing dreams aside for about 15 years. And I got very involved in other things. I did a lot of volunteer work. I did some writing. I did some freelance writing, just little piecemeal things. I got involved in education. And, but I wasn't fulfilled. And so I was having a discussion with my mom, and I was telling her about, I just wasn't fulfilled. And she said, you need to start writing again. And so this was the book that kind of got me going. And so that was sort of the second chance for me. And so I started it many, many years ago, and then just, finished it over the last 4 years. And so it's been a really interesting journey.
For me, for me as well, when I got the idea to write the book about my mother, it started out as a love letter to her, but then, as happened with many a writer, I realized that the story was really my own. The book was about me, and for the first time. And so the whole process of writing the book was full of revelation, and things that I had held as true my whole life might not have been true at all. And the process humanized my goddess of a mother, and in so doing allowed me to honor her in a much more real way and kind of claim my own story. So it was a second chance. It was a life transformation, and it was just so personally uplifting and liberating, because there are things that I discovered only because I was writing a book.
That's so interesting. This whole question of identity, it does shift over time, who we are, the roles we play, the people who define us. It's, for me, I was a liberal arts person all the way, and I couldn't get a job. So I got an MBA, became super practical, went to work in New York City banking, and loathed every minute. It was soul-sucking. So when I got that second chance to nurture myself, to become more reflective by moving to a small town and being a mom as opposed to a high-powered banker, it was hard, but it was unbelievable. It blew me away. I mean, I thought I knew everything. I knew nothing.
Right.
And so this idea of second chances, I looked at the internet and went to black and white photos for nature from Ansel Adams. I looked at photos by Dorothea Lange and Walker Evans for the Dust Bowl and Great Depression. And that put me in touch back with the side of me I had lost. And my mom passed away while I wrote this book. So she didn't have a life she loved. She more or less endured it. And that may have been typical of women of that time. And I was so determined not to have that be me. I think many of us react to our upbringing. But when you write suspense, which I do, and I think one of you writes a mystery as well, there are villains, there are heroes, there are David and Goliath stories, there's secrets, rivalries, tragedy, and that's life. So when we can reflect life in a way that satisfies us, it's just transformative.
I love how we all seem to have this reclamation story of like a second chance, like having dreams, but then life intervenes, and then somehow it comes around full circle, but we come back to our dream with more wisdom, more insight,
Yeah,
maybe a little more groundedness.
We come back to the passion.
Yes.
You know, that's that's where the passion was, and sometimes passion isn't that practical.
Yep.
Isn't that the truth?
And we have to live the practical sides of our lives too. But yeah, so it's just wonderful. It's just such a wonderful way of self-discovery and reflection and sharing. You know, it's all about the connection with people, whether you're writing to entertain or to teach or to empower. I mean, that's what it's all about, is connecting with people through your words.
Exactly.
And I totally hear you with the high-powered executive. Wall Street is a world of its own, but I was in magazine media and was that
Very
high-powered executive chief innovation officer of a global publishing company in times of great change. And, you know, we're all of similar ages, I think, and we were part of the generation where someone burned their bra a generation before and said, okay, here's the baton, now you can go out there and have it all. And I realized as I was writing and kind of unraveling the myth of my mother, there were a lot of myths that we were living. And that's one of the reasons why the process for me was transformative. It was the first time in my life that I ever stopped. I didn't move to a small town, but I went from a corporate role and world to my dining room table in my pajamas, glasses, and my computer screen 7 days a week. And at first it felt like a very small world and what have I done? But I realized so many things about career, and that's a whole nother panel.
Isn't it?
But I totally hear you with how transformative that stopping and pausing and being an observer, as all writers are.
Well,
It's
isn't that
also being an outsider. Sorry to interrupt. When you move and know no one, you are an outsider, and you learn new powers of seeing and looking.
Sure.
And it's very humbling.
I know that for me, writing has always provided a doorway into the examined life, whether that was a conscious decision or an unconscious decision. And it sounds from hearing what you have to say that that's also true for you, Deborah, that there was like this opening. It's like, now I am living the examined life. I'm really looking at my life spread out here. And it's not that you can go back and change the past, but you can definitely go back and change what the facts mean.
Absolutely. And I have, out of this whole creative journey came a venture for women called Skirting the Rules. And it helps women 50 plus reinvent their next act. And part of it is this reflection to move forward. And not everybody is a writer. I wouldn't recommend writing a book to almost anyone because it was a torturous process from start to finish. But you can think like a writer, and you can realize that the pen is in your hand, and you are the producer, the director, the writer, and positioning it that way is something that kind of reflects the journey that I went through, and I have found is very helpful to other women.
Hi, everyone, and we're back. The storms took some of our panelists down for a while, but Kari and Stevie have switched places, but we're all still here. So did the process of writing your book surprise you in any way, change your life, or lead to unexpected consequences, positive or negative, on yourself or others?
I can answer that yes. I never saw myself as a creative writer. I teach a heavy course load of college English courses that are academic, business and professional writing, and I didn't have the courage to be a creative writer. So I just kind of noodled around the edges with the environmental themes and the themes about young people and the challenges they're facing. And pretty soon I had scenes and characters interacting, and I realized I was writing a book, a novel. I didn't tell anyone though. I kept it a secret, and I only told one writer friend who really encouraged me. I'm very grateful to her. But what happened with me is that I realized that life is going to happen whether we seize it or not, right? That we need to take advantage of it. And my kids' journeys, you know, they say you're only as happy as your unhappiest child. I think we've all heard that. When our kids have difficulties, we have difficulties. So as women, as mothers, as writers, so much is intertwined.
I think writing changes your life in general. Certainly writing this book changed my life in that I got from beginning to end and actually got to published. So that part feels very good. It enhanced my confidence, and it made me realize that I have a lot more to say.
Mm-hmm. I think to answer this question, I didn't have any really, life-changing things or any huge impact on my life writing this book, but having started it so long ago and then coming back to it through, just kind of maturing through life experience, through a lot of really craft, working on my craft, what I saw from what I first wrote to what the book became was almost like watching my journey. Like, the book had great bones, but the writing wasn't quite where I wanted it to be. And through the process of the years of not looking at it and then working on my craft, the end product turned out just much more mature, it was sort of like I grew up writing this book in a weird way. As a writer, I grew up.
So my answer is yes to all of the above. Writing this book was transformative in so many ways, but I'll touch on two parts. I mentioned some of the other ways, but when we were talking about creative writing, I too was not a creative writer. I was a journalism major, and I could write the killer business email, but that was my whole career. So the notion of writing this book really made me need to immerse myself. And I too didn't think that I had that particular talent. So it was a discovery period for me. I immersed myself in other memoirs. I got a lot of feedback. I workshopped the book, and I really worked on taking a talent for writing, which was always in there, and making it come out in a new way. And that was an amazing process for me, because I'm wired to sum everything up in a headline. And if I could just write a prologue to a book in a paragraph and sum up the whole story, that's how I've been trained. And this whole process was unfolding the story.
Okay, I'm gonna send my stuff to you, and you can write my synopses.
which is also super hard. But it's just another way. It's kind of not even left brain, right brain, but it's just a whole nother way of writing and learning and pulling that out of myself. And now being able, to those of us who have published debuts now, to claim the role of author, it's a whole other world. Yes. And that has been surprising and amazing. And then seeing how readers respond to the story, and the reviews and all of that have been beyond what I ever would have let myself imagine. And I realize now that the story has meaning to people, and that blows me away. I still haven't found the right words for that, but it blows me away when readers reach out and tell me what it means to them. It's crazy.
That segues nicely into the next question, which is what impact would you like your book or books to have on the world, and what do you want the takeaway to be for your readers? What is your message to them?
I think I touched a little bit on that in one of the first questions, in that that as women, we need to sometimes look at things in a different way and to be able to solve a lot of our own problems and problems in the world. And we have that capability, we have that power. But more importantly to me is I want my books to bring joy to people. I want to provide an escape. I want to provide, sometimes, we live in a time right now where there's so much serious stuff going on that it's nice to just go back to those days of, those old movies and those old shows and just lose ourselves in the fantasy and just get a break from all the seriousness and some of the heaviness that's going on in the world. And so that's really what I want to bring to people. I want to entertain. If I can educate in any way, that's fabulous. If I can make people, women in particular, feel empowered and good about themselves, that's even better. So that's really what I want to bring to the table.
And I'm going to jump in next because I feel like my internet is going to be unstable again in a moment. There's just been an enormous lightning bolt. So what I would love for readers to gain from reading my own unique story about my upbringing is really to acknowledge that we all have wounds, every single one of us. And there are ways to process what you've been through, to leverage it for your own good, and to emerge from what could be challenging situations in a very strong way. I just wrote an essay. All of us now know you have to write a lot of content around the book. And I just wrote an essay that someone published. I think it was Covey Club or Parade. And it really was about, I had a narcissistic mother, and it made me a success because I learned to be more intuitive. I learned to be imaginative. Everyone wanted me on their team at work because I could let someone else shine. I didn't have to be first. And there were like 6 or 7 other things. And so having readers go through that story and come out feeling more positive about their own experiences and maybe reframing them in a way is what I hope they take from it.
I go in another direction. Mine is a call to action. It is full of the heavy, serious stuff. The Me Too movement, opioid crisis, environmental injustice. I say that we need to do something. And as a call to action, it also is an empowerment to people who just feel lost, that they can have no effect on the world, that everything is beyond them. So I want people to get up and do something, to give a damn, and to reach out to others and say, let me help you through love, through friendship, through any way that we can connect. And I don't want to sound Pollyanna-ish, but in our times, which are so negative and characterized by a lack of civility and just basic decency, the fact that we can lend a helping hand to others and take one that's sometimes harder is huge. So I want everyone to realize they have agency.
The message that I'd like to convey is that aging is a process of nobility, that we don't stop developing just as we get older. We can develop psychologically, spiritually, till we don't, till it's all over. And to instill in people this sense of engagement at whatever level. You were talking about engagement, Deborah, in activism and healing for the world. And I think that, one's senior years, one's silver years is a great time to do that. You've got a little more time on your hands, and you've got a little more miles under your belt to approach life with a heart textured with both love and loss. And there's a lot of wisdom in that. So I'm hoping to dispel some of the mythology that getting older is some process of degeneration. That no, it's a process of regeneration as we get older. And there are all kinds of surprises around every corner that come with getting older that both delight and engender joy.
That's a lovely note to end on. I love that, a textured heart. Thank you so much. So thank you, everybody, for speaking today. And to our viewers, don't forget to subscribe. And all the panelists' books are available on Amazon, and you can find the links below the video, as well as links to their websites, StephanieRaffelock.com, StevieZFischer.com, DeborahBurnsAuthor.com, and KariBovee.com. Thank you so much for being here and sharing your expertise and experiences with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.